I kicked down the door. My Christmas surprise turned into a disaster. I wanted to surprise my daughter and arrived without warning, only to find her outside in 10 weather, wearing her pajamas, while her husband and his family were opening Christmas presents inside. What happened next made them scream and changed our lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The phone rang. Sharp, violent cuts through the evening quiet. I set down my whiskey glass. The amber liquid barely touched and reached for the receiver. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across Martha's old armchair where I'd been reading. "Dad, I can't do this anymore." Rose's voice hit me like a freight train derailment. Broken, sobbing. 25 years of marriage to Martha had taught me to listen for the spaces between words, the pauses that revealed more than speech ever could. "Rose? Sweetheart, what's wrong?" The phone cord stretched as I stood, pacing to the window. December wind rattled the glass, and my reflection stared back. Gray hair disheveled, concern etched deep in the lines around my eyes. He screamed at me for burning the toast. Her whisper came through what sounded like an echo chamber. Bathroom. Door locked. I can't breathe, Dad." My grip tightened on the receiver, knuckles whitening. "Slow down, sweetheart. Tell me exactly what happened." "It was just toast. I was trying to make his mother's breakfast the way she likes it, and the stupid thing got stuck. And when it popped up brown instead of golden..." Rose's voice cracked. "He threw the plate across the kitchen, called me useless, said I embarrass him in front of his parents." The glass under my free hand fogged with my breath. Outside, bare branches clawed at the darkening sky like desperate fingers. Where is he now? Downstairs with Irving, watching football, acting like nothing happened. Olive keeps making these little comments about how I need to learn proper household management. Rose's laugh came out hollow, bitter. "They're all down there and I'm hiding in the bathroom like a child." I closed my eyes, saw her at 7 years old, hiding in this same way after nightmares. Back then I could fix everything with hot chocolate and bedtime stories. "Will you come for Christmas? Please, Dad, I need you here." The words I wanted to say burned in my throat. "Yes, I'll drive through the night. I'll be there in 6 hours and we'll figure this out together." Instead, I heard myself saying, "I wish I could, Rose. I have that Peterson contract meeting on the 23rd. If this deal goes through..." Silence stretched between us, the kind that fills with all the things you should have said instead. "I understand." Her voice went flat, professional, the same tone she'd used at Martha's funeral when people offered empty condolences. "You're busy. It's not that simple. It never is." The line went quiet except for her breathing, shallow and quick. Somewhere in the background, I heard Irving's booming laugh echoing up from their living room. "Rose, listen to me. After Christmas, when things settle down, maybe we can..." "I have to go. He's calling for me." The dial tone buzzed in my ear like an angry wasp. I stood there, receiver in hand, watching the fire consume another log. My whiskey sat forgotten on the side table, growing warm. I should cancel everything. The Peterson contract could wait. Rose needed her father, but this deal meant financial security. Early retirement from the railroad had been good to me, but contracts like Peterson's were rare. Fixed income doesn't stretch like it used to, especially with the way everything costs more each year. I hung up the phone. The house felt too quiet. The fire crackled. The house felt too quiet. 3 hours passed. I'd gone through all the motions, checked the locks, banked the fire, brushed my teeth. Now I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved like accusations. The clock read 10:47 p.m. Sleep felt as distant as Mars. I got up, padded to the window in bare feet. The same reflection stared back, but this time I saw something else. Cowardice, maybe. Or just the face of a man who'd let his daughter down when she needed him most. 1 year ago, this exact room. Rose had called with her engagement news. She'd driven up from Westbridge on a Saturday morning, radiating that particular glow of new love. Sat on the living room couch where Martha used to fold laundry, twisting her grandmother's engagement ring, Martha's ring, around her finger. "His name's Randall," she'd said. "Randall Morrison. He's 38. works in commercial real estate. Dad, I'm so happy. Even then, something had felt wrong. The way she said his name too carefully. The way she kept glancing at her phone, checking messages. When do I get to meet this Randall? Soon. He's very busy with work right now, but you'll love him, Dad. He takes care of everything. Makes all the decisions so I don't have to worry about anything. That should have been my first warning. Martha never needed anyone to make her decisions. She'd been my partner, not my dependent. People don't change that easily, sweetheart, I told her when she mentioned his temper. Marriage reveals character. It doesn't transform it. You're being unfair. He loves me. Her nervous laughter had filled the room like smoke. She'd spent the next hour defending a man I'd never met, making excuses for behavior she'd barely described. Red flags flapping in a hurricane, and I'd chosen not to see them. Why hadn't I fought harder? Why hadn't I demanded to meet him before any engagement? Why had I nodded politely when she said he was too busy to visit? The clock showed 11:23 now. I returned to bed, pulling Martha's quilt up to my chest. She'd sewn it the year before she died, her hands still steady, despite the cancer eating her from the inside. Martha would have known what to say to Rose tonight, would have known how to cut through Randall's manipulation with surgical precision. She'd never been afraid to speak difficult truths when someone she loved was in danger. But Martha was gone, and I was here, lying awake while my daughter suffered because I was too afraid of making waves, too concerned about a business contract to drive 6 hours and be the father she needed. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows like it was trying to break in, or maybe break out. Sometimes it was hard to tell which way the pressure was flowing. I rolled over, pressed my face into the pillow, tried to find sleep that wouldn't come. The wedding. How could I have ignored what happened at the wedding? 11:30 p.m., still staring at the ceiling, but now my mind had fixed on that January day 11 months ago. The day I watched my daughter marry a stranger and did nothing to stop it. St. Michael's reception hall. Rose in Martha's grandmother's dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. She'd looked beautiful and fragile, like spun glass that might shatter with the wrong word. I'd sat alone at the family table, watching Randall's relatives dominate the conversation. The guest list had been small, mostly his people. Rose's friends from college hadn't been invited. Too expensive, she'd explained. Randall thinks we should keep it intimate. Olive Morrison had positioned herself as the expert on everything, her voice cutting through the reception chatter like a buzzsaw. Now Rose will need to learn how to be a proper wife, she'd announced to anyone within earshot. Randall has specific expectations about household management, organization, meal planning. His previous girlfriends never quite measured up in that department. Rose had smiled, that tight, brittle smile she'd perfected. I'm looking forward to learning. Like marriage was a master class in pleasing one man instead of a partnership between equals. Irving Morrison had been worse. Crude jokes about keeping wives in line delivered with the confidence of a man who'd never been challenged. Other guests had shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything, including me. Women need to know their place, he'd declared during his toast. That's what makes a happy marriage. Right, Rudolph? I'd lifted my glass and said nothing. Coward. The worst moment came during the cake cutting. Rose had laughed as she tried to feed Randall a small bite, the way couples do at weddings. Instead of playing along, he'd grabbed her wrist. Careful with the suit, Rose. This jacket costs more than most people make in a month. Her smile had faltered, just for a second, but I'd seen it, that flash of shame and embarrassment. She'd apologized, at her own wedding, for nearly getting a tiny bit of frosting on his precious jacket. He's just nervous about the wedding, Dad, she'd whispered when I'd asked if everything was okay. Even then, she was making excuses for him. I got up again, paced to Martha's jewelry box on the dresser. Her wedding ring still sat in the velvet slot, catching moonlight from the window. 43 years we'd been married. Never once had I grabbed her wrist in public. Never once had she apologized for existing in my space. The clock read 12:15 a.m. now, December 19th. Rose's call felt like it had happened days ago instead of hours. I thought about Thanksgiving dinner at their house in Westbridge. Rose serving everything perfectly, Olive criticizing the seasoning, Randall correcting Rose's story about her job. She'd grown quieter as the evening wore on, smaller somehow. Christmas last year, she'd called to explain why Randall couldn't make it to Pennsylvania. Work emergency. Always work. Then the gradual isolation. Friends who stopped calling because Rose was never available. Hobbies abandoned because they took time away from Randall's needs. Phone calls that grew shorter and less frequent. I'd watched my vibrant, independent daughter disappear piece by piece, and I'd told myself it was normal. Adjustment period. Growing pains of marriage. Lies. All lies I'd told myself because confronting the truth meant confronting my own failure as a father. Sitting in that wedding reception, watching Rose flinch at her husband's public criticism, I'd felt the same helplessness that consumed me during Martha's final days in the hospital. The same sense of being powerless against forces I couldn't control. But this was different. Martha's cancer had been an enemy we could name and fight together. Randall was a poison that worked slowly, convincing Rose that the sickness was her fault. I'd paid for that wedding, walked her down the aisle, given her away to a man who saw her as property, to be managed rather than a person to be loved. The storm outside was picking up intensity. Tree branches scraped against the siding like fingernails on a chalkboard. Dawn couldn't be far off. I needed sleep, but my mind kept circling back to that phone call, to Rose's broken voice, to my own pathetic response about business contracts and scheduling conflicts. Tomorrow I would call Peterson and... Sleep took me mid-thought, but my dreams were full of wedding bells that sounded like alarm bells, and a daughter who kept apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Morning light crept through frost-covered windows as I stood in the kitchen, nursing my second cup of coffee. The clock above the stove read 10:05 a.m. Sleep had come in fragments, haunted by Rose's broken voice and my own cowardice. The phone rang. Sharp, insistent. "Mr. Hudson?" The voice was professional, familiar. Peterson's assistant from the contracting firm. "I'm calling about your meeting with Mr. Peterson scheduled for December 23rd. I straightened, suddenly alert. 40 years of railroad work had taught me to pay attention when business called. "Yes, I've been preparing the structural assessments for the bridge reinforcement project. Unfortunately, we'll need to postpone until January 8th. Her tone carried genuine regret. "Mr. Peterson's mother was admitted to the hospital yesterday evening? Family emergency?" The irony hit me like a derailed boxcar. Family emergency. "I understand completely. Please give him my regards." "Thank you for being so flexible, Mr. Hudson. We'll confirm the new date after the holidays." The dial tone buzzed in my ear, but I barely heard it. My mind was already racing, calculating possibilities. December 23rd. Free. January 8th. 2 weeks away. I could drive to Massachusetts. I could be with Rose for Christmas. The coffee mug trembled in my hand as the realization sank in. Peterson's crisis had just solved mine, or maybe created a bigger one, depending on what I found when I got there. I set down the phone and paced to the window. My reflection looked different somehow, less defeated. The gray December morning seemed brighter, full of possibility instead of resignation. 4 hours of driving through December snow. Rose's surprised face when she opened the door. Maybe I could finally see what was really happening in that house, beyond the careful words and forced cheerfulness of our phone calls. My engineering mind kicked into gear, the same methodical approach I'd used for bridge calculations and structural assessments. Route planning. I-95 would be packed with holiday traffic, but I-84 through Hartford might be clearer. Timing. Leave Christmas morning early, arrive during family time when everyone would be together. I moved to the kitchen drawer where I kept important papers. Rose's address, written in Martha's careful handwriting, from the wedding invitation. 47 Maple Street, Westbridge, Massachusetts. I'd driven there once before, 11 months ago, to watch my daughter promise her life to a man who'd already started dismantling her spirit. This time would be different. This time I'd be arriving as her father, not as a wedding guest trying to keep the peace. The house felt electric with purpose. I hadn't felt this kind of clarity since Martha's final days, when every decision mattered and time was running out. Maybe time was running out for Rose, too, in a different way. I needed supplies, gifts, something to show her this wasn't just an obligation visit, but a choice, a priority. The phone rang again. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Rose, somehow sensing my change of plans. But caller ID showed Mrs. Martinez from next door. "Rudy, I saw your light on early. Everything all right?" "Better than all right, Elena. I'm going to see Rose for Christmas after all." "That's wonderful. She'll be so happy." Happy? When was the last time I'd seen Rose truly happy? Not the brittle smile from the wedding photos, or the forced cheerfulness during our brief phone calls. Real happiness, the kind that lit up her blue eyes like Martha's used to. I would find out soon enough. First, I needed to find something special for Rose, something to show her how much she mattered. The next morning brought purpose I hadn't felt in months. I sat at Martha's old kitchen table with road maps spread across the checkered tablecloth, marking routes with a red pen. The methodical planning felt familiar, comforting, like designing a bridge. Every detail mattered. Pine Valley Shopping Center buzzed with last-minute Christmas energy. Families hurried between stores, arms full of wrapped packages, children tugging at coat sleeves. I moved through the crowd with singular focus, my list folded in my coat pocket. The winter clothing boutique felt warm and crowded. A young saleswoman approached with practiced holiday cheer. "Can I help you find something special?" "A warm scarf for my daughter. She lives up north now." "How lovely. What's her coloring like?" I closed my eyes, summoning Rose's face from happier times. "Blue eyes? Light brown hair? She gets cold easily, like her mother did." The woman guided me to a display of wool scarves. My fingers found one in deep blue with silver threads woven through like captured starlight. Soft, practical, beautiful without being showy. This would bring out her eyes perfectly. I paid without checking the price. Some things mattered more than my fixed budget. The bookstore next door smelled of coffee and paper. Rose had always been a reader, even as a child. I found her curled in Martha's chair with mystery novels and biographies of strong women. What kind of books did she read now? Did Randall approve of her reading choices? Biography section. The clerk, a woman about Rose's age, pointed toward the back corner. I scanned the shelves methodically. Too many choices. Then I saw it. Breaking Ground, the story of Julia Morgan, architect. A woman who'd built her own path when the world told her she couldn't. Perfect. The gas station attendant recognized me when I pulled up to check my tire pressure. "Getting ready for a trip, Mr. Hudson?" "Driving to Massachusetts Christmas morning. Surprise visit to see my daughter." "That's beautiful. Long drive, though. Weather's supposed to turn." I spent the next 2 days preparing like I was heading into battle. Checked oil levels, topped off antifreeze, tested the spare tire, cleaned out the truck cab and laid emergency supplies in the back. Blanket, flashlight, jumper cables, cell phone charger. The gifts sat wrapped on Martha's old hope chest. Blue paper with silver ribbon. Simple, elegant, the same way Martha used to wrap presents, with hospital corners and perfectly tied bows. December 23rd arrived gray and cold. I spent the morning second-guessing myself. Should I call ahead? What if Rose tried to talk me out of coming? What if Randall's family resented the intrusion? The phone beckoned from its perch on the kitchen wall. I reached for it twice, then pulled my hand back. No. This needed to be a complete surprise. Rose needed to know that someone could show up for her without conditions or appointments or convenient scheduling. Mrs. Martinez waved from her front porch as I loaded my overnight bag into the truck. "Going somewhere nice for the holidays, Rudy?" "Visiting Rose. Haven't seen her in too long." "That sweet girl deserves a surprise. Drive safe." That evening I sat in Martha's chair by the fireplace, staring at the wrapped gifts. The blue scarf would keep Rose warm. The biography might remind her of her own strength. But what I really wanted to give her was something I couldn't wrap, the knowledge that she wasn't alone. The weather forecast called for snow starting after midnight. Light accumulation, nothing I couldn't handle. I'd driven through worse storms during my railroad days, checking track conditions and blizzards that would send most people to their basements. I set out my clothes for tomorrow, dress pants and a clean shirt for Christmas dinner, assuming I was invited to stay. The photo of Martha and Rose from Rose's college graduation went into my shirt pocket. A talisman, a reminder of happier times when my daughter smiled without reservation. The alarm clock sat ready on the nightstand, set for 5:30 a.m. 4.5 hours of driving through December weather to see Rose's face light up with surprise. At least I hoped it would be surprise. And joy. Not the complicated emotions that came when someone you loved showed up uninvited to witness your carefully hidden pain. But that was a bridge I'd cross when I reached it. For now, I had a plan, gifts, and the kind of determination that had carried me through 4 decades of keeping trains running on time. The alarm was set for 5:30. 4.5 hours to see my daughter's face light up with surprise. The alarm shrieked at 5:30 a.m., cutting through dreams of Christmas mornings when Rose was small. I dressed quickly in the pre-dawn darkness, muscle memory from decades of early railroad shifts guiding my movements. Coffee steamed in my thermos as I loaded the truck. Gifts secure in the back seat, road atlas on the passenger seat, tank topped off from yesterday's preparation. The thermometer outside the kitchen window read 22 degrees. Perfect driving weather if the snow held off. Light flakes began falling as I pulled out of the driveway at 6 a.m. sharp. Christmas music drifted from the radio, Bing Crosby crooning about white Christmases. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, driving through the start of one, hoping to find my daughter before the snow got too heavy. Mile markers ticked past in the gathering dawn. Pennsylvania countryside rolled by, farmhouses with warm yellow windows and smoke rising straight up in the still air. Other families were probably gathering around Christmas trees right now, children tearing through wrapping paper while parents sipped coffee and took pictures. Was Rose awake yet? Did Randall's family do the big celebration Christmas morning, or were they the type to save everything for dinner? I realized how little I knew about their traditions, another failure to add to my growing list. The radio crackled. Heavy snow warning for western Massachusetts, temperatures dropping to 10 degrees. Drive carefully, folks, and have a blessed Christmas morning. 10 degrees. Rose had always been sensitive to cold, even as a child. I remembered Martha bundling her in layers before school, fussing over mittens and scarves, while Rose protested that she looked like a marshmallow. Traffic thickened as I crossed into New York. The snow was coming down harder now, fat flakes that stuck to the windshield between sweeps of the wipers. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. 40 years of driving in all kinds of weather, but today felt different. Today someone was counting on me getting there, even if she didn't know it yet. Connecticut brought heavier snow and slower traffic. The radio announcer's voice cut through a Christmas carol. I-84 East, moving slowly due to weather conditions, but road crews are out in force. Take your time, and remember, no destination is worth risking your safety. But some destinations were worth the risk, weren't they? Some trips mattered more than comfort or convenience. I stopped for gas outside Springfield, Massachusetts. The station was busy despite the early hour, other travelers pushing through the weather to reach family. A young attendant with kind eyes helped me clear snow from my windshield. "Merry Christmas! Long drive?" "Driving to see my daughter. Want to surprise her?" His face lit up. "That's beautiful. She's lucky to have a dad like you." Lucky. The word sat heavy in my chest as I pulled back onto the highway. Rose used to think she was lucky to have me before I let her marry a man who saw her as something to control rather than someone to cherish. The final hour stretched ahead through clearing skies. Massachusetts countryside opened up around me, rolling hills dotted with bare trees, houses growing closer together as I approached Westbridge. My heart hammered against my ribs with each mile marker. What would I find when I got there? Rose putting on a brave face for Christmas morning while Randall's family criticized everything she did. Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe their phone call had been an isolated incident, emotions running high during the holidays, but something in my gut said otherwise. The same instinct that had kept me safe around heavy machinery for 40 years was telling me that Rose needed rescuing. The GPS announced, "In 2 miles, turn right on Maple Street." Maple Street, Rose's street. I'd driven down it once before, 11 months ago, following a procession of wedding cars to a reception where I'd watched my daughter shrink under her new family's expectations. Houses appeared through the clearing snow. Christmas decorations twinkled from front porches. Children's voices carried on the cold air, kids outside with new sleds and snow boots, making the most of Christmas morning snow. Number 47 sat back from the road, a colonial with green shutters and a wraparound porch. Randall's BMW was parked in the driveway next to an older sedan I didn't recognize. company. Or maybe Olive and Irving had stayed overnight. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, engine running, heat flowing over my cold hands. This was it. No more planning, no more second guessing. Just walk up to that door, ring the bell, and see my daughter's face. The gifts rustled as I transferred them from the back seat to my coat pockets. The biography fit easily in my left pocket, but the scarf made my right side bulge noticeably. I pulled my jacket closed and stepped into the bitter morning air. My breath came out in white puffs as I crossed the street. Somewhere in that house, Rose was probably helping with Christmas breakfast, making sure everything was perfect for Randall's family, making herself smaller so they could be bigger. Not today. Today, someone was coming to make sure Rose knew she mattered. I walked up the driveway, gifts in my coat, ready to see Rose's surprise. Then I saw the figure by the snowbank. The figure wasn't moving, hunched against the white mound of snow, knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight around itself. My brain needed 3 seconds to process what couldn't be possible. Rose, my daughter, sitting in the snow in thin Christmas pajamas. The gifts fell from my numb fingers, scattered across the frozen driveway like discarded prayers. I ran, my bad knee screaming protest, every step bringing the impossible into sharp focus. Her lips were purple. Frost crystallized in her hair. She was shivering so violently her teeth chattered like chattering bones. "Rose," the word tore from my throat. "What are you doing out here?" She looked up with confusion clouding her blue eyes, eyes that had once sparkled with Martha's same intelligence, now dulled by cold and something deeper, something broken. "Dad?" Her voice came out slurred, hypothermic. How are you here? I thought you had that meeting with Peterson." I stripped off my heavy winter coat, wrapped it around her small frame. She felt like ice through the thin fabric. How long had she been out here? In 10-degree weather? In pajamas? "Never mind the meeting. We need to get you warm." I tried to help her stand, but her legs couldn't support her weight. "Can you feel your fingers?" She stared at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "Not really. Everything's fuzzy." I half carried her to the truck, yanking open the passenger door. The heater had been running, warm air rushing out like salvation. I settled her into the seat, cranked the heat to maximum, found the emergency blanket I kept behind the driver's seat. "I'm so sorry, Dad." Tears started flowing down her cheeks, leaving warm tracks on frozen skin. "I made such a mess of everything. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing." I rubbed her hands between mine, trying to force circulation back into white fingers. "Tell me what happened." Through the windshield, I could see the house, Christmas lights twinkling merrily, warm yellow glow spilling from every window, sounds of laughter and celebration drifting across the frozen lawn. They were inside, enjoying Christmas morning, while Rose nearly froze to death outside their door. "It was an accident," she whispered, words coming clearer as warmth returned to her body. "I was bringing coffee to everyone during present time. There was wrapping paper everywhere, and I tripped." Her voice broke, started again. "The coffee went all over Olive's grandmother's Persian rug, this beautiful, expensive rug that's been in their family for generations. Randall started screaming about how I ruin everything I touch." I kept rubbing her hands, but rage was building in my chest like steam pressure in a locomotive boiler. 40 years of engineering had taught me to recognize when systems were approaching dangerous levels. Olive said they'd been too lenient with me, that I needed to learn consequences. Rose's breathing was evening out, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Irving agreed, said women need discipline. That's how his generation kept marriages strong. And then what happened? Randall told me to go outside and think about being more careful. Her eyes met mine, filled with shame and confusion. In my pajamas. He said I could come back in when I learned my lesson. The pieces clicked into place with mechanical precision. The locked door I'd noticed, her hypothermic state, 4 hours in deadly cold. "They locked you out," she nodded, fresh tears starting. "I tried knocking, but Olive said I was disturbing their Christmas morning, that I'd already done enough damage." Through the passenger window, I could see them in the living room, passing presents around a circle, laughing and toasting with champagne glasses, like they hadn't just left my daughter to freeze to death over spilled coffee. As feeling returned to her fingers, Rose looked up at me with eyes full of pain and shame. Dad, I need to tell you what really happened this morning. Rose's hands were finally warming in mine, circulation returning with painful tingling. She flexed her fingers experimentally, wincing as feeling returned. Start from the beginning, I said quietly. What time did this start? Around 8:30? Everyone was in the living room opening gifts. I wanted to be helpful. Brought a tray of coffee from the kitchen. Her voice steadied as warmth spread through her body. There was beautiful wrapping paper scattered everywhere, silver and gold like a fairy tale. I should have been more careful. I kept my voice level. What happened when you tripped? The coffee went everywhere on their Persian rug, this gorgeous antique that belonged to Olive's grandmother, hand-woven, worth thousands of dollars. She was making excuses for them already, the pattern so ingrained she couldn't stop. Randall started screaming that I ruin everything I touch. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Over an accident. But it was such an expensive rug, Dad. I tried to clean it up, but Olive said I was making it worse. She kept saying how they'd been too patient with me, how I needed to learn responsibility. Rose's words came faster now, like a dam bursting. Irving backed her up. Said women in his day knew how to be more careful around nice things. Through the windshield, Christmas music drifted from the house. Jingle bells played while my daughter recounted nearly freezing to death. Then Randall said, Go outside and think about being more careful. Just like that. No coat, no shoes, in 10-degree weather. And they locked the door behind you. Rose nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. I knocked after about an hour. My feet were so cold they burned. But Olive called through the door that I was disturbing their Christmas celebration, that I had already ruined enough of their morning. 4 hours. She'd been outside for 4 hours in deadly cold while they exchanged gifts and drank champagne. I kept thinking someone would come check on me. That surely Randall would realize it was too cold, too dangerous. Her voice cracked. But the longer I waited, the more I understood that this was my punishment, for being clumsy, for not being good enough. Rose, listen to me. I turned to face her fully. No one deserves this. You understand that, right? No one. But I did mess up their expensive rug. Stop. The word came out harder than I intended. That rug isn't worth 1 minute of your life, not 1 second. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. The idea that she mattered more than an object was apparently revolutionary. They said I need to learn to be more careful around nice things, that I don't contribute financially, so I shouldn't destroy what they've earned. Every word was a nail in their coffin. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, physical endangerment. The pattern was crystal clear to anyone willing to see it. I started getting really cold after the second hour. Couldn't feel my hands anymore. But I thought if I went back inside before learning my lesson, it would just make things worse later. So she'd chosen hypothermia over their anger, chosen potential death over disappointing them further. The level of control they'd achieved over her was breathtaking in its cruelty. When you couldn't feel your hands, Rose, that's when frostbite starts. You could have lost fingers, lost toes. You could have died. I know that now. Fresh tears started. When I saw you walking up the driveway, I thought I was hallucinating. Dad showing up like some kind of Christmas miracle. No miracle. Just a father who'd finally arrived in time to see the truth he should have recognized months ago. Through the passenger window, I could see them in the living room, laughing and passing around presents, like they hadn't just left my daughter to freeze to death. I looked through that window at their perfect Christmas scene and felt something snap inside me like a bridge cable under too much stress. 40 years of measured engineering responses disappeared in an instant. Stay in the truck, Rose. Keep warm. Dad, please don't make it worse. I have to live with them. I turned back to her, my daughter wrapped in my coat like a refugee from her own life. No, Rose, you don't. Not anymore. The walk to their front door felt like approaching a demolition site, each step measured and deliberate. The Christmas wreath mocked me with its cheerful red bough, while I could still hear Rose's teeth chattering behind me. I tried the handle first, locked, just like she'd said. My knock cut through their Christmas music. Footsteps approached. The door opened to reveal Randall, champagne glass in hand, face shifting from surprise to calculated charm. Mr. Hudson, What a wonderful surprise. Rose didn't mention you were coming for Christmas. She couldn't mention it. You locked her outside. His smile faltered for just a moment. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Rose needed some fresh air to calm down after her little accident. In 10-degree weather, in pajamas, for 4 hours. Well, sometimes lessons need to be memorable. The door frame splintered under my boot. Wood cracked like a gunshot as the door slammed against the inside wall. Christmas ornaments rattled on the nearby tree. Silence fell over the living room like a curtain dropping. Olive looked up from her place by the fireplace, Irving from his leather armchair, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips. I filled their doorway like Judgment Day arrived early. How dare you put my daughter outside in weather that could kill her? Olive recovered first, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I remembered from the wedding. Rudolph, you don't understand the situation. Rose spilled coffee on my grandmother's Persian rug, a priceless family heirloom. And that justifies risking her life? Irving set down his champagne with deliberate calm. You're overreacting, old man. Rose needed to learn responsibility. That's how marriage works. Marriage? I stepped into their warm living room, snow still clinging to my shoulders. You call this marriage? You left her to freeze to death over spilled coffee. Randall moved to block my path, trying to reclaim authority in his own home. This is our house, and Rose is my wife. You have no right to burst in here, and I have every right. She's my daughter, and you nearly killed her. The Christmas tree lights twinkled behind them, expensive gifts scattered beneath, like evidence of their comfortable cruelty. They'd been celebrating while Rose turned blue with cold 10 feet from their door. Olive tried again, her voice rising with desperation. We were teaching her to be more careful with valuable things. You were teaching her to fear you. There's a difference. Marriage requires discipline, Irving insisted, his authority crumbling as I towered over his chair. Marriage requires love, something you people wouldn't recognize if it kicked down your door. That's when Rose appeared behind me, still wrapped in my coat, her presence the final piece of evidence, in this case against them. Her frost-bitten fingers, her hypothermic confusion, her body telling the story their words tried to deny. Randall's mask slipped completely. Rose, tell your father you're fine. This is family business, and he's interfering. Rose looked at her husband with new eyes, eyes that had nearly frozen shut outside his door. I couldn't feel my fingers, Randall. I thought I might die. Olive's voice cracked with desperate control. You're being dramatic, Rose. You could have knocked louder if you were really in trouble. She tried. You told her she was disturbing your Christmas. I looked around the room at their shocked faces, then at Rose shivering in my coat. The talking was over. Rose, show me where your things are. We're leaving. Now. The words cut through their stunned silence like a blade through silk. No discussion, no negotiation. The engineering mindset that had kept trains running on schedule for 40 years was taking over. Rose moved toward the staircase, still wrapped in my coat, her steps steadier now that warmth had returned to her limbs. I followed, leaving the family scattered around their perfect Christmas morning like debris after a derailment. You can't just take my wife, Randall's voice cracked as he scrambled after us. This is kidnapping. I turned on the stairs, looked down at him with the same expression I'd used on rookie conductors who thought they could argue with physics. She's my daughter first, and you forfeited your rights when you nearly killed her. Rose's bedroom was small, tucked under the eaves like an afterthought. Her few personal belongings looked lost among the expensive furniture Randall's family had chosen. A childhood teddy bear sat on the dresser next to bottles of expensive perfume. The contrast told the whole story. Just the important things, I said, pulling her college duffel bag from the closet. We can replace everything else. Her hands moved with growing certainty as she selected what mattered. Photos of Martha, her laptop with resume files, the few pieces of jewelry that had been gifts from me, not them. Her fingers paused over the wedding ring, then deliberately left it on the dresser. Olive appeared in the doorway, face flushed with desperate authority. Rose, dear, think about your marriage vows. You promised to stay through good times and bad. Rose looked up from folding her winter coat, the one that had been hanging uselessly in the closet while she froze outside. I promised to love and cherish, not to freeze to death over spilled coffee. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Irving and Randall crowded behind Olive, 3 adults trying to intimidate one young woman into staying in their carefully constructed prison. "You're making a big mistake, old man," Irving wheezed. "We know people. Important people." I zipped Rose's bag shut and slung it over my shoulder. "Your important people weren't there this morning when Rose needed them." I was. We moved toward the stairs, the family backing away like they were facing something dangerous. Maybe they were. Maybe a father's protective love was more dangerous than they'd calculated when they chose cruelty over compassion. In the living room, their Christmas celebration sat abandoned. Expensive gifts scattered under the tree, champagne glasses half empty, the Persian rug still showing coffee stains that had nearly cost my daughter her life. Randall made one last desperate play at the front door. "Rose, you can't leave me. We can work this out. I love you." Rose paused, looked back at the man who'd locked her outside to freeze. "Love doesn't leave people to die in the snow, Randall." The broken door frame testified to the truth of that morning. I'd kicked it down to reach her, and now we were walking through it toward freedom. Outside, neighbors peered from windows, drawn by the commotion. The family's perfect facade was crumbling publicly, their carefully hidden cruelty exposed for the whole street to witness. Randall followed us to the truck, hands slapping against the hood as I loaded Rose's bag. "This is theft. I'll call the police. She's my wife." I walked around to face him using every inch of my height and 40 years of authority, earned through honest work. "Step away from my truck. Step away from my daughter. You can't. If you ever contact her again, you'll answer to me, and next time I won't just kick down a door." He stepped back. Cowardice, finally honest, replaced his pretense of authority. Rose settled into the passenger seat, pulling my coat tighter around herself. The truck's heater blasted warm air, chasing away the last of the morning's deadly cold. In the rearview mirror, I could see them standing in their driveway, diminished, powerless, watching justice drive away. As we pulled onto the main road, Rose finally looked back at the house growing smaller in the side mirror. The first 10 miles passed in silence. Rose stared out the passenger window at suburban Massachusetts rolling past, processing what had just happened. I kept the heater running full blast, checking her color in the rearview mirror every few minutes. Finally, she spoke. "Dad, what if I made a mistake? What if they were right about me being careless?" I'd been waiting for this. The victims always blame themselves first. "Sweetheart, spilling coffee doesn't justify leaving someone to freeze to death. Not ever. Not for any reason." Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "But what if Randall comes after me? What if he tries to force me back? He won't get within a mile of our house. I guarantee it." By the time we reached the Connecticut border, Rose was starting to talk about practical things. Where she'd sleep, how long she could stay, whether she still had her marketing skills after months of having every decision made for her. "Your old room is exactly like you left it," I told her, "and we'll get you set up with your own bank account first thing. If we need restraining orders, we'll get them, whatever it takes." We stopped for gas and coffee near Hartford. Rose pulled my coat tight around her pajamas, still self-conscious, but the truck driver filling up next to us smiled and tipped his cap. "Y'all heading home for Christmas?" "Taking my daughter home where she belongs," I said. Rose managed a small smile. "Dad surprised me with a visit." It was the first time I'd heard her interact normally with a stranger in months. Not apologizing, not shrinking away, just talking like a regular person deserved to talk. Back on the highway, she found Martha's photo in the glove compartment, the one I'd carried for luck during my railroad days when jobs were dangerous and coming home alive wasn't guaranteed. She would have come too, wouldn't she? If she'd been alive. Your mother would have arrived with a baseball bat and half the church ladies as backup. The memory made us both smile. She never did like bullies. "I don't know how to thank you for saving me." "You don't need to thank me. That's what fathers do." Pennsylvania mountains appeared on the horizon as the December sun started its early descent. Rose was sitting straighter now, color back in her cheeks, voice stronger with each mile that took her farther from that house. "I used to be good at marketing," she said suddenly. "Before I met Randall, I had ideas, campaigns that worked. You'll have them again, better ones probably. You've learned things about people that most marketers never figure out. Like what? Like how to recognize when someone's trying to control you. That's valuable knowledge in business. She was quiet for another hour, watching familiar Pennsylvania countryside roll past. Then, do you think I can actually do this? Live on my own, make my own decisions? Rose, you survived being married to Randall for 11 months. After that, anything else will feel like vacation. For the first time all day, she laughed. Really laughed, the sound Martha's daughter was supposed to make. As we pulled into Greenwood, past the gas station where I'd bought supplies for the trip, past the diner where Martha and I had shared our first date 45 years ago, Rose pressed her face to the window, like a child seeing Christmas lights. Everything looks exactly the same. But we both knew that wasn't quite true. The town looked the same. The house would look the same. But Rose was different now. She'd walked through fire and come out the other side, holding her own hand. As we pulled into our driveway, Rose looked at the house where she'd grown up. "It looks exactly the same," she whispered, "but I feel completely different." Rose's office occupied a corner of the 14th floor, with windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Sunlight streamed across her desk, where marketing campaigns spread like blueprints for someone else's success. The nameplate read Rose Hudson in bold letters, maiden name reclaimed, identity restored. I'd driven up for our monthly lunch, a tradition we'd established once Rose got steady on her feet. Watching her move through her workplace with quiet confidence, greeting colleagues who clearly respected her work, I barely recognized the broken woman I'd found in a snowbank 5 months ago. "Dad, you should see the nonprofit campaign we just finished." She pulled up graphics on her computer screen. "Increase their donor engagement by 40%. My idea about storytelling rather than statistics really worked." Her boss stopped by while I was admiring her wall of client testimonials. "Mr. Hudson, you should be proud. Rose has become invaluable here. We're discussing a promotion track." The Waterfront Cafe, where we'd lunch, was Rose's choice. A place where young professionals gathered to discuss deals and dreams. She ordered confidently, paid with her own credit card, left a generous tip from her own salary. "Sometimes I think about that morning," she said as we watched boats navigate the harbor. "How different everything would be if you hadn't come. But I did come. That's all that matters now." Her Cambridge apartment was small, but entirely hers. Every piece of furniture chosen by her, every picture placed where she wanted it. The Christmas cactus on her kitchen windowsill had bloomed twice since she'd brought it home. Another survivor, thriving in better conditions. The divorce had been finalized in March. Clean break, no assets to divide, no lingering connections. Rose had wanted nothing from that life except her freedom. The wedding photos had gone in the trash. The expensive gifts returned or donated. She'd kept only what belonged to her before Randall tried to erase her. "I see a therapist once a month," she told me over coffee, "just to make sure I stay healthy. She says I'm making remarkable progress for someone who experienced that level of, what did she call it? Coercive control." We walked back toward her office building through spring afternoon sunshine. Other people our age were probably grandparents by now, but I'd take my successful, independent, emotionally healthy daughter over early grandchildren any day. "The therapist helped me understand that it wasn't about the coffee," Rose continued. "It was never about being more careful or less clumsy. It was about making me small enough that I'd never think I deserved better." A group of her coworkers waved from across the street, heading back from their own lunch break. Rose waved back, comfortable in her place among them. She'd built a life here. Friends, colleagues, a future that belonged entirely to her. "What are you doing next weekend?" she asked as we reached her building. "I want to cook dinner for you. Try out that new recipe I've been working on. I'll bring dessert, your mother's apple pie recipe." She hugged me goodbye on the sidewalk, professional woman in her business suit, saying farewell to her father who'd driven 2 hours just to make sure she was still thriving. Because that's what we did now. We made sure of each other. As I watched Rose disappear into the glass office building, confident and purposeful, I knew Martha would be proud. Our daughter had found her way home to herself. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.